All right, welcome to an idea that I had basically at the start of when I got the new power rankings board. I don't want to just do like just the weekly power rankings. I want to look at trends. And one way to look at trends is to say, all right, so at the end of the month, what was the average? So, if a team's first one week, they're 12th the next, they're 5th the next, yada, yada, yada. Well, what was their average at the end of the month? So I'm going to try this today. We'll see how it goes. If it's a popular idea, every month at the end of the month, we will look at the average over that month of how each team did. So again, I just looked at the numbers and I totaled up and I went, all right, so over this month, this team averaged to finish at first. This team, was the best according to the power rankings. And again, it's looking from, and it doesn't include my preseason rankings. So don't worry, the preseason rankings do not include in this at all. This is just what I did in the month of October, and then I'll do one at the end of November, again, based on whether this one does well or not. And what we can do then is every month we can look at how teams did that month, and then at the end of the year, cumulative totals. So there you go. Number 31 on this list, and I don't need to track where they were last week because there was no last week to this. This is monthly. Ottawa's last on the board. Should surprise almost nobody. Almost nobody because number 30 is Minnesota. And, Minnesota last night against St. Louis, they showed some signs that they're ready to come out of this. But have they dug themselves in too deep? And that's the question that only Bill Guerin can answer. And apparently he's going to be patient with the whole process. And we'll see how that goes for him. Why is that one in the middle? Number 29, Kings. So again, I'm not into anything anywhere near controversial yet. These teams have been at the bottom all month, so it kind of averages out pretty darn well. That you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And when you look at the overall standings in the NHL, again, it makes a lot of sense that these teams are down there. Number 28, Detroit. And losing 8 games in a row will do that. So the bottom row on this board is from 28 through 31, and it's Detroit, LA, Minnesota, and Ottawa who occupy those spots. We're not really into anything controversial at all yet. Number 27, and I like this when I saw this even on paper. 27 is New Jersey. Yeah, and where they're at right now, it's not far off of it. And it's too bad because there's a lot of players who I think are playing pretty darn well. The scoring seems to be up. They're getting some of it together. You can see it. But whether or not the goaltending is going to be good enough to get them there is the question mark. And it's been the question mark I've had since the preseason. Number 26. San Jose. I am stunned to see San Jose this low on the board, to be honest, because this was supposed to be a year that at least saw them still in the playoffs. They made it to the Final Four last spring, and now they are down here. So it's been kind of a bad month for them. Kind of a nightmare, as it were. Number 25. You guys knew there was going to be a remark regarding the jersey, right? Number 25, Dallas. For Dallas, are we surprised at all? And yes, this is a Dallas one. See that? Dallas Stars. So yeah, Dallas is a surprise to me that they're this low. Now, I didn't think they'd end up in the top row or anything coming out of August, but I'm surprised they're as low as they are. I had kind of expected at least playoffs this year, and they and San Jose are the two teams on the board so far that likely expected playoffs and are very surprised they're not in them. New Jersey, with the changes that were made, there was an expectation they'd get better. Playoffs, I don't know, but there was an expectation they'd be better. Number 24, Chicago. Chicago's had moments where they've looked good, and then their offense over the last few games has not. So for Chicago to be 24th on this board doesn't really surprise me a whole lot. And what I like about this is that if we do this looking at every month and then at the end of the year it's a cumulative, where did everybody end up? It's kind of a fun look at things. And just to see, like, are the top 16 teams at the end of the year in the standings, or are they nowhere close? So yeah, Chicago for me at 24 for the month of October. Number 23, Columbus. They suffered early. They moved their way forward. Last night's result against Edmonton likely knocked them back a little bit from where they were on the power rankings this past Saturday. I'm thinking likely, but again, I just change them and move them around day to day. I don't really pay any attention until the following Saturday as to where they were the week before. I don't move them around as much day to day now as I used to. It used to be the board was just chaos. It's not chaos anymore. Number 22, Vancouver. They lost their first 2 games. They were 29th the first week of the power rankings, which affected where they are on the board now. While I still get nervous with some of the games that they have, they are likely going to be much higher when I'm doing the November one in a month's time. Unless the bottom falls out, which has happened with Vancouver before. But yeah, they started the season kind of iffy. They haven't played a lot of really top teams, and that's what'll kind of keep you down in this range. Number 21, Philly. Philly, it seems to change every game with where they're at. Some games they look like world beaters, and then the next game they look absolutely useless. And I still don't know where Philly's at overall. I don't know if they're a good team or not. If I was at a game, I might be yelling at them, are we going to the playoffs or not? Because one night they look like they're fantastic, and the next night it's bad. Number 20, Arizona. Now, Arizona obviously is higher than that on the current power rankings. They had a setback last night against the Montreal Canadiens, and that's where things get tricky for these teams that are off to fast starts. They've played certain teams that maybe they're really good against, and then as the year goes along and their schedule evens out, they're going to play against some opponents that might be more of a challenge for them and maybe cause them a setback like Arizona had last night with Montreal. Which was weird. If you wipe out the first minute of each period, it'd be a heck of a lot closer game, but that's not how things work. Number 19, New York Rangers. Started out with a couple of wins, looked pretty darn solid. Slumped. Coming out of that game against Tampa, they look good again. So what are they? I don't have a clue. I don't have any idea what the Rangers want to expect from here. And yeah, we're still in teams that I don't have sitting in top 16 spots. Number 18, this one surprises me. It surprises me that the Jets are at 18. I had expected them, now preseason I had them at 15, but I hadn't expected them to move down. I thought, I'm probably being overly harsh about their defense, and they're probably going to come through and prove all of us wrong, and they really haven't. So for Winnipeg, this is an alarming time. It looks like they could very well be a team that misses the playoffs. And due to injury and potential retirement of Bufflin and all that other wonderful stuff, there's a lot to be concerned with if you're a Jets fan right now. Number 17, Florida. Their comeback victory over Colorado last night is perfectly emblematic of the entire season they've had. From one period to the next, you don't know what you're getting with Florida. Now, when I went and saw them in Vancouver the other night, I happened to see a Florida team that wasn't very good for 3 periods. But you still got the feeling, even in that game, if they get a little bit going, if Barkov gets a little bit if Huberdeau gets a little bit going, this game could get really close really fast. Florida, it's like that. They go to overtime a lot. I don't have them in a top 16 spot for the month, which I'm okay with because, again, they're not winning anything in regulation, it seems. And they need to show some ability to close out games, an ability not to fall behind often, and need to come back in other games. There needs to be a more consistent result with Florida. Number 16, Montreal. So again, coming out of that win last night over Arizona, they're playing decent hockey right now. So 16 on the board, and just as sort of a spoiler alert, not really, because we've still got a few days before I do my power rankings. Right now, Montreal's number 16 on the power rankings that are current as well. So pretty consistently right around middle of the pack for Montreal this year. and they're a dangerous team. They should scare some people. Number 15, New York Islanders. They had a decent enough start. Then they lost a few, which caused them to drop in the power rankings. Now they're on this massive winning streak. The winning streak has pulled them up overall for the month to 15. And I would imagine in November they'll end up higher than 15 for the November power rankings. Again, depends how this video does as to whether or not I'll do another one in November. Number 14, Anaheim. And again, with Anaheim, much like Florida, the difference between Anaheim and Florida is Florida can change on a dime during the game. With Anaheim, it seems to be just the games themselves. They'll have one really good game and then follow it up with a dud. And so they have been as inconsistent as anybody else. This is how parity works too, though, and I'm aware of that with a league now that has parity, and people complain about it. I heard Tim and Sid complaining about it. I'm like, wait, are we complaining that we have a league where everybody's kind of even and any given night any team could beat anybody else? Are we going to complain? Because I don't complain about that. And then the funny thing was they were complaining about the standings being close. Guys, it's been 10 games. Of course the standings are close every year 10 games into the season. That's kind of how it works. Number 13, Pittsburgh. So they were hot, then they weren't, then they are. They lost Malkin. It didn't really hurt him at first, and then it did. Now he's apparently ready to come back on Saturday. I do think that Pittsburgh, of the teams in the East, is the one that received the least amount of respect preseason. And there were people who told me, oh, Shannon, you're afraid. Because I kept saying, I'm not pulling them out of the playoffs because I'm afraid they're going to get better. And people are like, Pittsburgh's done. You're good. They're not going to make the playoffs again. It's over. They're done. No. Much like this guy, they never go away. Ever. Yeah, I know they haven't made a movie in a while, but that's because they did the reboot and it sucked. And they had Freddy versus Jason, which was great, but you can't do a sequel to Freddy versus Jason. And you're going to do Freddy versus Jason versus Pinhead, but they were stupid. They didn't have Pinhead in. All right. And they were going to do Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, which would have been great, but Bruce Campbell rightfully looked at the script and went, this doesn't make any sense. Anyway, number 12, Calgary. The Flames started out really high up on the board. They've dropped substantially. I have to say I'm surprised. Now, I said before the season started, like, I don't think Calgary's going to finish first in the West again, which I didn't think was controversial, but for some Flames fans, that sounded kind of like dissing them. I did not think that we'd see a fall like we've seen so far. Some guys who are cold offensively and just not a whole lot of guys showing up right now that you saw last year. So we'll see what happens with the Flames, and maybe Mike Smith's the difference. Maybe Dave Riddick needs Mike Smith back there. I don't know. Maybe that is the difference. Don Cherry will tell you that's the difference. Brian Burke will tell you that's the difference. Number 11, St. Louis. So the Blues, and again, I said look for them to kind of get off to a bit of a slow start because, cup hangover is a thing. Could be hard to get motivated for games in October after the intensity of the Stanley Cup final in June. And we've kind of seen that. We have. And the biggest issue with the Blues right now is their backup goaltending with Jake Allen. I look at Jake Allen. I look at Corey Schneider in New Jersey, and I think, is this something that could work? I mean, if New Jersey retains a bit of salary on Schneider, it could be a one-for-one deal, no cap change, and it could fix both goalies. I know with Allen, it's always felt like it's somewhat psychological, and with Schneider, maybe that's where we're at too. But again, I know that's not going to happen. It was just one of those ones I looked at and I thought maybe. Number 10, Tampa. Now, before the season started, everybody had Tampa at number 1. I didn't, and I didn't do that just to be different. I did it because being number 1 in the NHL back-to-back, just look it up. The President's Trophy, teams don't generally win it back-to-back. The Canucks did in 2011, 2012, but it's not generally a trophy that the same team wins twice in a row. So I kind of expected Tampa to fall back. That being said, I didn't expect them to be as mediocre as they've been. They seem to be getting it together. The game between them and Boston, they were great. And since then, they've kind of fallen back to mediocre. So I'm not sure where Tampa's at, but I know this. They don't look like a President's Trophy winner right now. It looks like that will not be a problem for them this year. No jinx for them this year. If anybody, I don't really believe in it. Number 9, Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Leafs have had some issues. And of course, when you lose Tavares, that's going to happen. He's your number 2 center or number 1 center, depending on the night. And you don't have Kadri anymore. That's going to cause some pretty major ripple effects through your forward lines. And then you've got a defense that's still coming together. And Tyson Barrie has underachieved thus far as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It is impossible to look at what Barrie's done and say, oh, well, he's been really good. He's not producing points. There have been some defensive miscues. You knew the defensive miscues were going to be there with Barrie. That was the trade-off with the offense. Well, they're not getting the offense either. So Toronto's got some things to figure out. I don't envy Kyle Dubas's job at all. That being said, I also agree with people who assert that Toronto's paying their top 4 guys $40 million and likely overpaid. What, you got to figure Marner's getting overpaid a bit. Matthews might even be getting overpaid a bit. And again, it's not a lot, but it adds up. If you pay, say, an extra $500,000 to 4 players, that's $2 million. You pay an extra $1 million, that's $4 million. That's a player. So it makes it tougher and tougher to have that depth. And I think we're seeing that with Toronto. Number 8, Oilers. The Oilers would be much higher on this board. But that first week, they were pretty low. So, and that first week they were low, and I will still tell you guys why. They beat the Canucks and they beat the Kings. Where are the Canucks and the Kings on this board? So I didn't move the Oilers up very much. That's why when people say that I have the Oilers too high up on the board now, because they haven't played anybody, my answer is I held them back. It took a while for me to bump the Oilers up. And bumping the Oilers back down for their losses, I've done that in recent days, but not as much as people might expect. Because again, you look at the bounce back game they had in Columbus last night, I think people overreact with certain teams when it comes to winning or losing. I think there's an overreaction. Looking back to Tampa, there's an overreaction of, oh, they're back, that we have when they have a good game. And then when they have another bad one, we're perplexed by it. So I think with the Oilers, the expectation is, well, they're going to fall apart. Yep, they're going to fall apart. Here it comes. They're going to fall apart. I'm holding off on that. Number 7, Vegas. The Vegas Golden Knights have been, well, pretty standard Vegas Golden Knights. They're at 8-5. They're playing pretty well, just motoring along. Looks like they're going to get 96, maybe 98 points this year. Maybe they get 100. And then playoff time, here we go. Now, I don't have one of these designs. If you look, these are all old logos anyways. And these I've had for well over a year. I think I've had these for 2 years. Some of them are kind of beat up and scratched up. And Vegas didn't exist when these were made. So that's why Vegas is a different shape and a whole different logo than the other ones. Number 6, Nashville. Nashville has been lingering around 8, 9, 10 the first few weeks, but they're getting better, and they're playing really, really well. And that dominant win over Chicago, which followed a win over Tampa in Tampa, they're playing some really good hockey right now. So Nashville Predators, there were some who felt they would fall off. They haven't thus far. There's still a lot of time for them to do so, but they really haven't thus far. Number 5, Carolina Hurricanes. So the Hurricanes get off to that fast start. They struggled on a long road trip, where they stumbled a bit, but they seem to be picking themselves back up. So Carolina being number 5 overall for the month of October. Pretty solid overall. Number 4. Yeah, I know. People don't like me using the old logo. But for Buffalo, that's what they had when these came out. The Buffalo Sabres have been a revelation thus far this season. Whether they can keep it up or not, that's the question. But they had a very good October. Now we'll get into November and see if they can keep it up. Last year, they were excellent through about mid-November, and then the nosedive started. So they need to avoid that nosedive, but it is part of the reason why people are kind of expecting them to fall off. I don't know. I think as long as their goaltending can hold up, they have a good chance. Number 3, Capitals. Now, the Capitals were number 1 the first couple of weeks, and then they dropped to 11. They dropped to 11 on the power rankings because, well, they couldn't hold a lead. So not being able to hold a lead hurt them. Then they showed in that comeback win against the Canucks, who couldn't hold the lead that night, that they were picking it up. And this team is getting better. Had an excellent road trip, and they could very well find themselves back at number 1 on my board within the next week or so. Again, I don't have like massive, huge fluctuations for the most part. I do what I call market corrections, where a team will lose a big game and it might be the second or third in a row, and I go, yeah, no, this team's got to drop. But for the Capitals, right now, they look pretty solid. Number 2, Boston. They have consistently been right around the top of the board, and that means number 1, to the surprise of nobody, is Colorado. They've been number 1 for the last, I think it's 3 weeks, and they've been just excellent the whole way through. Now, the fact that they're missing Rantanen and Landeskog means November likely will be a bit of a challenge for them, but I don't see them dropping that much. But there you go. So that's the overall standings of the power rankings for the month of October 2019. So for people who are enjoying their Halloween, just a little fun video. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. We can do this again in November, December, January, and so on. And then at the end of the year, the overall power rankings for the season. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And I will talk to you again soon.